Hi, YouTube.
Hey, YouTube friends and family, it's your boy GB Reviews, and today I'm back with my financial advisor, guru friend, CD, and we're going to talk to you today, continuing the dialogue about debt and credit. People have asked, yes, you've explained credit, but what about debt collectors, and why should debt collectors call me, and should I pay them, and how does that affect me? And isn't it great to pay debt collectors? So I think we wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Remember, the goal is to not have debt where you have debt collectors, but life happens. And so, we wanted people to feel like they were in a space where they could understand this process. So, CD is here with me today. We are going to talk about some of the hard truths about debt collectors, debt, and how this affects your credit report, and your ability to obtain wealth in the future. Because ultimately, all of this is about maintaining wealth, and building wealth for your family. So, with that, CD, I'm turning it over to you.
So I think if we start to unpack these things one at a time, I think at the top of your list was, why interact with debt collectors. So I think you have to consider the debt and how it was created. And so you always want to be responsible and you always want to pay your debt. That said, there's a lot of systemic issues that are very challenging for Americans. And by that, I mean healthcare. And so a lot of times people will be stuck with these large healthcare bills that, somehow their insurance didn't cover, or they legitimately needed, medical assistance, but could not afford it. And so now their credit has been damaged by these things. And so, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I just don't necessarily believe in how the healthcare system in America is set up. And that's just an example of how someone could find themselves with a very large collection or judgment on their credit from an unpaid hospital bill or healthcare bill.
So, all right. So, that is definitely a challenge in America, and that's probably an example that a lot of older or middle age Americans go through. But let's take it down to
Not necessarily. There are a lot more that I've seen in
really.
professional history where it's not so much middle class or older folks, it's the people fresh out of college who didn't really have healthcare insurance. So all they had was what their university or college offered.
Oh,
And
wow.
so they'll, those people who don't have a primary healthcare physician, or just aren't accommodating to doing these adulting types of things, they'll
Hmm.
find themselves using the emergency room as if it were their personal, clinic. And so they get these bills, they rack up these bills. And because they're just fresh out of college or fresh out of high school, they really don't have the wherewithal to actually pay those bills, or even the desire, because they probably don't feel like they should. They've gotten healthcare assistance that they needed. And so, there's a lot of young folks out there with hospital bills on their credit.
All right, so then let's go down that line. So I'm a college graduate. I graduated, I was in some type of accident or something, skiing or something, right? I'm on a ski trip and I break my leg, but I don't have health insurance because I'm just a recent graduate, right? I'm with my friends, I'm young, I'm healthy. I don't need insurance. And so I go to the emergency room, they put a pin in my leg, patch me up, and later on, down the road, I get a bill for $20,000. And so I'm a young person. I'm not gonna pay that. Now my leg is good now. Uh, what does that look like? So I don't pay it for 5 years, and then a company contacts me and says, "You need to pay this."
Yeah.
What is it? How does that work? Like, should I pay them?
Well, I mean, if the question is, should you pay them? The answer for me is always going to be yes, because it's your bill that you accrued. Again, though, just taking a step back, if you found out that you had this excess bill of $20,000, what I would recommend you do is just to pay them every month. If it's $1 every month, then they will take it, and it will stop your account from being pushed to a debt collector or being put into a judgment. So they would just get $1 a month from me until The $20,000 is paid.
Oh, so you mean from day one? But now,
Yeah.
yeah, so from day one, that makes sense. And yes, it's your bill, so you should definitely pay it. But I'm looking at it from the standpoint. So I was a student and I lived in City A, right? Because I was in City A going to college, and then
Mhm.
I left City A because now I'm off living my best life as an adult, right? I'm not in that city anymore. And I totally didn't even think about that bill. And sometimes these bills take a long time to find you. And
For sure.
5 years has passed, and the reason I use 5 years is because, from my understanding, is at the 7 year mark, it falls off my credit report. So why should I even worry about it? So how does that work?
Yeah, in that instance, again, I think, if it's already a collection or judgment on your credit and it's 5 years old, I'm probably going to wait it out another 2 years and let it just fall off
Mhm.
because of time. Because at 7 years, approximately, any negative reporting has to fall off, and that would include, a hospital bill judgment or a utility judgment as well. And so, any interaction or engagement with that company or that merchant or that bill or that debt collector then refreshes the 7 year time frame. So if they
So
call you and you somehow get in contact with them and they're able to document that they made communication, then that 7 years, that 5 years goes away and the clock is reset to 7 years. So, if you're not going to pay it or negotiate them removing it from your credit as part of your settlement to pay it, then it just wouldn't make any sense to engage them.
so if my moral compass fell into your line and said, "Oh, you should pay this," at that point, it is not in my best interest to necessarily make a payment if it's close to dropping off, because it resets it. If I engage with them at all, I
Yeah.
write them a letter, I send them $2, I take a phone call from them, that resets my clock.
It does. It does reset your clock. And let me step back. I don't want to be the person that wants to have this high moral aptitude and imposing it on people. If I'm that person that you described in that scenario, and it's now COVID-19, it's not even a ponder for me. I'm not even gonna like go into deep thought of whether or not I wait 2 more years to let this fall off, or take what little money I'm able to gather together right now to pay a bill from 5 years ago. I'm just not going to do it. And so
Right,
I,
right, right.
I don't want to come across as if, oh, you pay your bills all the time, no matter what, even if it, puts you in a situation that you can't feed yourself or keep, shelter over your head. No.
Well, I'm glad you put that, you prefaced it that way, because I think there is a culture in America that puts a moral judgment or a stigma on individuals not paying their bills. But if you're a corporation and you file bankruptcy because you couldn't pay bills, oh, that's too bad. They fell on hard times. And so I find it a bit hypocritical that we do that because we don't know people's individual situations. And that's why I try to put myself in because I remember being a college student many years ago before my paper got tight. No.
Yeah.
Um, and I understand what it's like to maybe not want to pay something, or to let something ride, or
Yeah.
being a single parent and trying to cope with, should I eat or should I pay this bill? And this debt collector keeps calling me. The other thing is, with paying the things you said, I heard you say you can negotiate for them to remove something from your credit. So say you're 1 year in or 2 years in versus this
Mhm.
5 years in,
Mhm.
you can negotiate with them to remove it.
You can. I've actually done that a couple times. So I can give you one example where I received a hospital bill, and
Mhm.
it was probably somewhere between $250 and $600. This was me a few years out of college, and I had moved. And like to your point and your example earlier, I did not get the bill. I didn't even know it existed. It wasn't until I started checking into buying a home, my first home, that I realized that this judgment, this collection was even there. And so I reached out to the hospital, and at that point, they had sold the debt to a debt collector. And so I had to go and reach out to them. And that's when I told them, hey, I never received this bill. And, their negotiation for me was, at this point, if you're looking for us, we know that you're looking to get something, probably a car, probably a house. And so this is a tougher negotiation from our standpoint. And so instead of me saying, hey, I'll pay you 10 cents on the dollar if you just settle out this debt, I just said, I'll pay it in full, but I need you to remove this from my credit report. And so that was the negotiation. I
Mm.
paid whatever the face amount of the debt was, but it was in return for them remove. And so I got that in writing before I sent the payment.
Oh, so they can send you something like that in writing?
Yeah, of course. And it can have a time, an expiration date on it. So I got the letter saying that, this debt is negotiated closed. If I pay X amount of dollars within X amount of period of time, then this debt will be removed from my credit reporting. And so,
Interesting.
so I paid it. Now there was another time where there was a utility bill that someone put in my name that I had no clue, didn't even know about. Turns out it was a family member who used my name to get, I think it was one of the utilities or a cell phone bill. Again, I found out about it from pulling my credit once a year. And so when I saw this, I was at that point, it was already a judgment and a collection on my credit, not getting any information because they use an entirely different address. So I knew nothing of this.
Mm.
And essentially, I think the amount was $300, and I negotiated something like 10 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar. And I paid it off, and I asked them to remove it from my credit.
Now, in a case like that where it wasn't your debt, it was fraudulent, even though you had maybe association with the person who made the fraudulent account, why wouldn't you then just dispute it?
So I could have disputed it, but I think for me, in the interest of time, and I think I'd already bought my house, I'd already had a car, so I wasn't in a rush to essentially do something, and as it relates to making a big purchase or a big ticket item. I
Mm-hmm.
just thought about what my time would have been devoted to resolving that issue, and so
Oh, right.
my second step would have been to just dispute it because it wasn't mine, it was fraudulent, and I could have gone that route. But that takes longer in some cases, in a lot of cases. But to just say, you know what, I'll pay you 10 cents on a dollar on a $300 debt, and you agree to remove this from my credit report, we're good. They agreed to that. But had they not agreed to take it off my credit report, my next step would have been to just dispute it.
All right. So, okay. Interesting. So, one of the things, the questions I've always had, and I think a lot of people have, is pay the debt collector or pay the original debtor, or the creditor. Like, so Citibank, I had a credit card. I let it get behind, and I decided not to pay it. Three
Yeah,
years later, something collections calls me for the Citibank account. Should I pay Citibank or should I pay the collection agents?
you should pay the collection agency because at that point, Citibank has turned over the debt to the collection agency, or they've actually sold it to a third party collection agency. So it would just make the most sense to pay the debt collection
Oh,
company.
so there's no benefit to paying the original creditor.
Not at that point, because at that point, if it's in collection or if it's with a third party debt, they've already written it off. So they've taken a profit and loss. So they've taken the loss and filed an insurance claim on the loss. So there's no benefit to paying them because even if you sent it to them, they would just forward it to the debt collection company.
Yeah, I heard these debt. So I heard the debt companies basically they mine through all of them. They just buy up these things for pennies on the dollar.
Yep, they do. And then they will doggedly go after people, especially if they do a screening and realize these people actually exist or they own a home, then that debt becomes more attractive to them to buy. And so someone like me who isn't set up with a debt collection department or doesn't have like skilled, trained killers to like pretty much skip trace and track you down like a bounty
Right.
hunter, these other people, this is what they do all the time, and it's so easy for them. it makes sense for them because they can make a living off of doing nothing but tracking people down and attaching to their credit, or attaching to their wages, or attaching to their bank accounts.
Interesting. So like, so what? Okay, so this is another question since we're talking about debt collectors. What power do debt collectors really have? So original company, they sold it. Debt collector has a company, ABC Debt Collection. I mean, a lot of times, people. I hear horror stories about people calling and saying, "We're gonna come take your car. We're gonna take your house." Can they do that?
No, they can't. So in the event to collect a debt, you typically hear that like verbal disclosure when you call into a bill collection or debt collection company, or
Right.
if your account is in delinquent, they say that disclosure. And in essence, it's almost like, when the cops are trying to get you to admit to a crime, they can say whatever they want. Oh yeah, we have DNA. We pulled DNA off of the knife. We have DNA on the scene. All we have to do is wait for it to come back from the lab. So you better speak up before, it's
Right.
that thing. Excuse me one second. It's that sort of thing. They can say whatever they want to get you within the parameters of the law. They can say whatever they think they need to say in order to motivate you to pay. Now, if they bought the debt, they actually own the debt, so they can now come after you. So a lot of times, if you pay attention to loan notes and things, when you sign them, it says, these successors and or assigns or affiliates. So that means they're leaving the door open to, in the event they need to transfer the debt, sell the debt, they can, because that person or that company or that department would
Mhm.
become an affiliate. So that's how they would, shift the ownership to someone else. Now, can they foreclose? I mean, unless it's a mortgage, that would be the only way they could foreclose. But if you're someone who isn't as savvy or who doesn't understand how these things work, and someone calls you and they know all of your information and they're saying these things to you, well, then they might be able to mind trick you into paying the debt.
Yeah, because people have like a $70 light bill that's delinquent, and people will say, "Well, we're coming to get your car. The sheriff's coming to get you." And from what I understand, at least from the kind of these things that I've seen, people
Yeah.
have filed FTC complaints because they're not supposed to do those kind of things. And so that's I was just wondering about that. And I, again, we'll continue with these different topics. But so in terms of dealing with debt collectors, your recommendation is if you can early to pay your debts, even if it's $1 a month, because your credit reports reflect payments, not amounts. But if you're further along, potentially negotiate to get credit things removed. And then finally, if you're too far along, don't engage at all so it doesn't reset your years. Is that correct?
I think that's right. I think I would add a couple of nuances. First, as far as the credit is really about how consistent you are with your payments, period. So as long as you pay something every single month, like clockwork, then most of the time the credit reporting is going to work in your favor. Now, of course, there are, a lot of other pieces to that puzzle, but the main thing is about how consistent are you with making your payments every month, not $250 in January, zero in February, and then you pay it off in March. That's not consistent. And so that's not going to build up your credit score and make your
Mhm.
risk, appear lower to anyone who's looking to lend you an additional, line of credit or merchant
Right,
line.
right, 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 right.
um, with these collections and judgments, again, it's all scenario based, but typically if a collection or debt is a judgment is older than 5 or 6 years, it just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to engage that collection or vendor or merchant to refresh the 7 years unless you are planning on paying it off. And if you're planning on paying it off, it's still going to sit there, but at least it'll show as a paid judgment or a paid collection.
Mm.
That doesn't help you, in my opinion, unless you're buying a house. So if you're buying a house and you have a judgment or a collection, they're going to make you pay it before they're going to be willing to give you a loan. I don't know that that's been the case with a car. Most nowadays with most car loans, they'll just charge you a higher interest rate.
Well, I think the next thing we'll get into on this series is we'll talk about bankruptcies because I think that's the people want to figure out like, should I file bankruptcy? What's the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 11 bankruptcy? And, is it a bad thing? Because, you hear things about the president has filed bankruptcy. You always hear people talk about
Yeah,
president filed, you
Trump
know,
has filed bankruptcy at least 6 or 7
right, right,
times.
right. And so if the president can do it, then regular people should. I mean, that's how people think. Regular people should be able to do it. And so, and again, we are coming to be purveyors of information. We're not trying to make judgments about anybody. But I want to make sure that our community, our people have the right information because I think it's something, again, we don't talk about enough. We don't engage in enough. And I think that we have a kind of a duty, especially now, given the circumstances of, people being out of jobs,
Yep.
dealing with even dealing with COVID-19, things like that. I think we have a duty to give them good information. So I thank you. And again, I value your information. I think you're amazing. And I think that hopefully through our series of wellness, and financial improvements, hopefully we can help some people out there who have questions. And again, for people out there, I'm turning back over to my good friend CD Wilson, but I want to say thank you, and please, please, please continue to rock with me.
Sure, of course.
So, friends and family out there, you heard us talk about, debt collectors. If you have questions about debt collectors, if you have questions about things that we didn't cover related to credit reports or debt collectors, we are going to continue again talking about different financial topics that are going to help you to build wealth and help you to get yourself out of some of the challenges you may think you're in because you're not alone. We are here to help. But please let us know in the comments below. Please hit the like button for the algorithm. And also, please make sure that you share this with your friends and family, people who you think may need this information. So thank you very much. CD, thank you very much. I'm so happy to rock with you.
Thanks.
And you guys take care.
Subscribe but right below.